Kelly McGillis was once the kind of woman who made every man wish they could be maverick. She stood at the peak of Hollywood fame, shining in one of the biggest films of 1986, only to later vanish quietly, leaving behind a mystery few could explain. Born on July 9, 1957, in Newport Beach, California, Kellyanne McGillis grew up in what seemed like the perfect family. A physician father, a homemaker mother, and her role as the eldest of three sisters. Yet beneath that calm surface, she always felt different. She saw herself as tall, awkward, and out of place, struggling with insecurity and a sense of not belonging. While her peers were dreaming of prom nights and college plans, Kelly chose a different path. She dropped out of high school, determined to pursue acting, a bold and uncertain decision. She enrolled at the Pacific Conservatory of Performing Arts in Santa Maria, where she worked whatever jobs she could find, waiting tables and more, just to keep going. But deep down, she knew that if she truly wanted to make it, this was only the beginning of a much bigger journey. Kelly McGillis turned 21 and made a life-altering decision, leaving California behind, packing her bags, and heading to New York City to study at the Juilliard School, one of the most prestigious performing arts institutions in the world. But New York in the late 1970s was far from the polished destination it is today. It was gritty, dangerous, yet undeniably electric. Immersed in that raw energy, Kelly devoted herself completely to her craft, surrounded by fellow actors who lived and breathed performance. It was at Juilliard that she met Boyd Black, a fellow acting student who shared her passion. The two married in 1979, full of youthful hope and ambition. But reality soon set in. The pressures of pursuing acting careers in a demanding city took their toll, and by 1981, the marriage had ended. It was a brief, intense chapter, one that reflected two young people struggling to find their footing. At that time, Kelly was still searching for her identity, unsure of where she truly belonged. Yet an even more devastating moment was just around the corner. 2 years into her time at Juilliard, on a night in February 1982, her life took a dark and irreversible turn. Alone in her apartment, Kelly became the victim of a brutal home invasion when two men forced their way inside. What followed was not just an attack, it was a traumatic event that would linger in her mind for decades, leaving scars that would shape the course of her life forever. Kelly McGillis endured hours of terror that night, held at knife point, assaulted while desperately screaming for help, hoping anyone would hear. Eventually a neighbor did. The sound of police pounding on the door forced her attackers to flee. Kelly survived, but she would later admit that something inside her shattered forever in those moments. She was able to identify both men. One was sentenced to 3 years in prison, while the other walked free due to insufficient evidence. Justice, it seemed, was only partial. In the aftermath, Kelly tried to reclaim her life and continue her studies at the Juilliard School, but the trauma followed her everywhere. She gained weight, struggled with insomnia, and relied on alcohol just to get through the night. Panic attacks became a constant shadow. Even something as ordinary as riding the subway triggered overwhelming physical reactions. Yet, amid the darkness, her teachers and fellow students showed extraordinary compassion, offering her the support she desperately needed. Kelly would later admit that without them, she might not have survived at all. The emotional toll ran even deeper. At the time of the attack, Kelly had been living with a woman, and in the aftermath, she wrestled with a painful, distorted belief that somehow this violence was a punishment for who she was. It was a thought rooted in fear and confusion, one that added another layer to her already overwhelming trauma. And yet, from this breaking point, a turning moment was quietly beginning to take shape. Kelly McGillis carried her scars quietly, but she didn't let them stop her. In 1983, she graduated from the Juilliard School and quickly secured a supporting role in Reuben, an Oscar-nominated film that gave her a first real taste of Hollywood. It was a proud milestone, proof that she was on the right path. And yet, when filming ended, reality hit hard. She found herself back where many aspiring actors begin. Waiting tables, hustling to survive. One film credit wasn't enough to guarantee a steady career. Then came the turning point. In 1985, director Peter Weir cast her in Witness alongside Harrison Ford. The story followed a detective hiding within an Amish community after witnessing a murder, and Kelly's role as an Amish widow demanded something rare: quiet intensity, emotional restraint, and authenticity within a deeply traditional culture. She delivered all of it. Her performance didn't just resonate, it stood out. The industry took notice. Kelly earned nominations for both the Golden Globe and the BAFTA, instantly elevating her status. She was no longer just another aspiring actress. She was a compelling new presence, tall, striking, and capable of real dramatic depth. Producers were paying attention now. Opportunities were opening. And then, just 1 year later, in 1986, everything changed. One role, one film, would catapult her into a level of fame she had never imagined, and could never fully escape. Kelly McGillis stepped into the role that would define her career. Charlotte Blackwood, call-sign Charlie, in Top Gun. It was a role that seemed tailor-made for her. Charlie wasn't just a love interest. She was a brilliant civilian instructor at the Navy's elite flight school, an astrophysicist who carried herself with confidence, intelligence, and a quiet authority that could stand toe-to-toe with Tom Cruise's bold and reckless Maverick. At first glance, their pairing raised eyebrows. Kelly stood at 5 feet 11 inches, while Cruise was 5 feet 7 inches. She was 28, he was just 24. Some studio executives even worried she might appear too mature for him, too composed, too commanding. But once the cameras rolled, those doubts vanished. On screen, their dynamic sparked with undeniable tension and chemistry, blending intellect, attraction, and challenge in a way audiences couldn't ignore. When Top Gun hit theaters, it didn't just succeed, it exploded. It became the highest-grossing film of 1986, dominating pop culture with its iconic music, unforgettable visuals, and sweeping romance. Almost overnight, Kelly McGillis transformed into a household name. She had it all: beauty, talent, and momentum. Hollywood wanted more, and fast. Amid the whirlwind of fame, she briefly became involved with Warren Beatty, one of the industry's most legendary leading men. But the relationship was short-lived. Behind the scenes, Kelly was struggling. The spotlight that so many crave felt overwhelming to her. She would later confess that the attention didn't excite her, it frightened her. Kelly McGillis found herself trapped in a new kind of fear, the kind that came with fame. After everything she had already endured, she now struggled to tell who was genuine and who simply wanted something from her. Everywhere she went, she was surrounded, watched, approached. For someone already carrying deep emotional scars, the constant attention felt suffocating. Still, she kept working. In 1987, she appeared in Made in Heaven, a romantic fantasy directed by Alan Rudolph. The following year, she took the lead in The House on Carroll Street, a tense thriller centered on Nazi war criminals hiding in America. But it was her next role that would cut closest to home. In The Accused, she starred alongside Jodie Foster in a story that shocked audiences. The film followed a brutal assault case, where a woman is attacked in a bar while bystanders do nothing. Foster played the victim, while Kelly took on the role of the determined prosecutor seeking justice, not just for the crime, but for the silence that enabled it. Kelly chose the role with intention. She believed that stepping into the shoes of someone fighting for victims might help her confront her own past, perhaps even bring a sense of closure. The film was powerful, earning Foster an Academy Award and critical acclaim. But for Kelly, the experience came at a cost. Instead of healing, it reopened wounds that had never truly closed. Scene by scene, line by line, she found herself reliving the trauma she had tried so hard to move beyond. Kelly McGillis began quietly shifting away from the chaos of Hollywood, turning instead to something more grounded: live theater. From the late 1980s through the mid-2000s, She became a familiar presence at the Shakespeare Theatre Company, immersing herself in classic stage productions. She took on demanding roles, including the Duchess of Malfi in 2002, and later toured across the United States in 2004 as Mrs. Robinson in The Graduate. On stage, there were no retakes, no filters, just raw performance and immediate connection with the audience. It gave her something film never could: a sense of control, of mastery, of being fully present in the moment. But while theater grounded her, her film career was becoming more uncertain. After her emotionally taxing role in The Accused, she appeared in Cat Chaser alongside Peter Weller, a project she ultimately despised. The experience marked a turning point. For the first time, Kelly seriously questioned whether she even wanted to continue chasing success in Hollywood. The industry that once elevated her now felt hollow, disconnected from who she was becoming. Behind the scenes, the struggle was deepening. Throughout the late 1980s, Kelly battled alcohol and drug addiction, a quiet fight rooted in unresolved trauma from years earlier. She had tried to suppress it, to push forward without confronting the pain, but it was catching up with her. What looked like a successful career from the outside was, in reality, beginning to fracture from within. Kelly McGillis entered a new chapter of her life in 1989 when she married Fred Tillman, a yacht salesman. At first, it seemed like she had found a sense of stability. A year later, in 1990, they welcomed their first daughter, Kelsey, followed by their second, Sonora, in 1993. Motherhood became her anchor, something real and grounding, far removed from the glare of Hollywood. It gave her a sense of purpose that fame never could. But beneath the surface, the marriage was far from simple. Kelly had been honest with Fred from the beginning about her past and her attraction to women. Yet internally, she struggled with the feeling that she wasn't living authentically. Tensions slowly built between them, and the cracks in the relationship deepened. Then came a moment that shattered whatever stability remained. Shortly after the birth of their second daughter, Fred was arrested for soliciting sex from an undercover police officer posing as a prostitute. The scandal was deeply humiliating, casting a shadow over their already fragile marriage. Though they stayed together for a few more years, the relationship was, in many ways, already over. By this time, Kelly had largely stepped away from the spotlight of major Hollywood productions. She continued to act, but more selectively, appearing in films like The Babe alongside John Goodman, as well as Winter People and North. In 1999, she reunited on screen with Val Kilmer in At First Sight, a subtle reminder of the career she once dominated. But by then, her priorities had shifted, and Hollywood was no longer at the center of her world. Kelly McGillis may have still been working, but the truth was becoming harder to ignore. Her heart was no longer in Hollywood. Seeking distance from the industry and a chance at a different life, she and Fred relocated to Key West, where they opened a business together: Kelly's Caribbean Bar, Grill and Brewery. It was meant to be a fresh start, a new chapter far removed from cameras and expectations. Even as their marriage began to unravel, they remained tied to the business, holding on to the hope that something could still be salvaged. But behind the bar, the reality was far more complicated. This place that was supposed to represent renewal became the setting for a turning point Kelly never expected. Both she and Fred were drinking heavily, caught in a cycle neither could break. As she would later admit, they had become partners in crime, enabling each other's self-destructive habits rather than helping one another heal. The life they were building wasn't a recovery. It was a slow unraveling. Then everything shifted. At the restaurant, Kelly met Melanie Lays, a bartender whose presence would change her life. Melanie was openly gay, confident in who she was. For Kelly, the connection was immediate and undeniable. Despite being married and raising 2 children, she felt drawn to her in a way she could no longer suppress. What began as friendship gradually deepened into something more. Together, they faced a battle Kelly had been avoiding for years. Side by side, she and Melanie began the difficult journey toward sobriety, marking not just the beginning of recovery, but the start of Kelly finally confronting the truth about who she really was. Kelly McGillis finally began to rebuild her life, this time on her own terms. With Melanie by her side, she committed to sobriety, and together they supported each other through the long, difficult process of recovery. In 2002, she officially divorced Fred Tillman, closing a chapter that had been filled with both hope and pain. Leaving Hollywood behind for good, Kelly moved to rural Pennsylvania, choosing a quieter life focused on raising her daughters away from the spotlight. But she didn't stop there. Determined to turn her past struggles into something meaningful, Kelly took a job at Seabrook House, working as a counselor for people battling addiction. Drawing from her own experiences, she connected with those fighting the same demons she once faced. She also volunteered as a prison visitor, offering support and compassion to inmates. For the first time in years, her life felt grounded, not driven by fame or expectation, but by purpose. She wasn't acting anymore, she was helping. Then, after years away from the screen, Kelly slowly stepped back into acting. In 2008, she appeared in The L Word, a series centered on the lives of lesbian women in Los Angeles. Her first notable role in years. It was a quiet but symbolic return. A year later, in 2009, Kelly made a deeply personal decision public. In an interview, she officially came out, stating she was done with the man thing. With her children grown and her life finally aligned with her truth, she no longer felt the need to hide. It wasn't just a revelation, it was a declaration of freedom, the culmination of a journey she had been fighting to complete for decades. Kelly McGillis would later reflect on her life with a quiet sense of clarity, describing it as a journey of growth, change, and ultimately, acceptance of who she truly was. After years of standing by each other through recovery and personal transformation, she and Melanie formalized their relationship with a civil union in New Jersey in 2010. By then, they had shared nearly a decade together. But even that bond, built through some of life's hardest battles, wasn't meant to last. In 2013, they went their separate ways. This time, however, things felt different. Kelly wasn't lost or searching, she was grounded. For the first time in years, she seemed at peace with herself, no longer running from her past or questioning her identity. She had arrived at a place of acceptance. Seeking a quieter life, Kelly relocated to Hendersonville, settling into a secluded log cabin tucked away in the mountains. It was everything Hollywood wasn't: calm, private, and far removed from the noise that once defined her life. There she began a new chapter, not as a star, but as a teacher. At the New York Studio for Stage and Screen in nearby Asheville, she taught acting, Shakespeare, mask work, film performance. Her students didn't come because of Top Gun. They came for something deeper, to learn from someone who had truly lived the craft, who understood both its heights and its costs. Kelly embraced a simple life, focused not on fame, but on passing on what she had learned. Honest, unfiltered, and real. Kelly McGillis had long since turned her back on the demands of Hollywood. The red carpets, the scrutiny, the constant pressure, they no longer held any appeal. Instead, she embraced the quiet rhythm of her mountain community, finding comfort in a slower, more private life. Still, she never fully abandoned acting. She simply redefined her relationship with it. She took on roles that intrigued her, often in smaller, unconventional projects. In Stake Land, she played a nun in a bleak, post-apocalyptic vampire world, a role she found creatively compelling. The following year, she appeared in The Innkeepers, a haunting thriller set in an eerie hotel. Later, in We Are What We Are, a chilling cannibal horror film that premiered at Sundance, she continued to explore darker, more complex material. These weren't blockbuster hits, but that was never the point. For Kelly, these roles were about storytelling, about working with passionate filmmakers, not about fame. She would occasionally surface in other projects. A Hallmark film in 2016, a thriller in 2017, even a guest appearance on Dirty John in 2020. But these choices were intentional. Acting was no longer her identity. It was simply something she returned to when it felt right, when it fit into the life she had carefully built. Then, in June 2016, that sense of peace was shattered by a moment that echoed her past. Returning home one evening after a lecture, Kelly noticed something was off. The front door unlocked, a light left on inside. As she stepped in, a woman suddenly charged down the hallway, remember from the height of her fame. And that's entirely by choice. She gained weight, cut her hair short, and let it turn naturally gray. She dresses for comfort, not for attention. To some, she's almost unrecognizable from Charlie in Top Gun. But to Kelly, this isn't a transformation. It's a return to who she has always been. Charlie was a role. This is real life. Because behind the image the world once celebrated is a woman who endured more than most ever see. She survived trauma, faced addiction, embraced her identity, raised 2 daughters, and slowly built a life rooted in truth rather than expectation. A survivor who no longer apologizes. A woman who chose authenticity over approval, even when it meant leaving behind everything the world told her she should want. Today, in Hendersonville, she lives quietly, far from the spotlight that once defined her. Now in her late 60s, she continues to teach acting when the opportunity arises, sharing the knowledge she gained from the Juilliard School and decades of experience. She still takes on acting roles from time to time, but always on her own terms.